Welcome to CommercialDrones.fm, the podcast that explores the commercial drone industry, the people who power it, and the concepts that drive it. I'm your host, Ian Smith.
Hey everybody, welcome to Commercial Drones FM. Ian Smith here, and I'm sitting in Chicago, Illinois at AUVSI's Exponential Conference with Michael Chasen, CEO of PrecisionHawk. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Very excited to be here and talking about all of the great things going on, not only at this conference, but in the drone industry.
Well, I'm very excited to ask you this first question then. Why did Arya kill the Night King in Game of Thrones?
I don't think that we should be discussing Game of Thrones spoilers on the show. I would like to say, though, that if Winterfell had used drone technology to fly over the gates and maybe be able to get a sense of where the Night King's armies were, they would have been more successful in the fighting. So I do think that drones should have been used in that battle. But again, I'm not a writer of the show. So just my perspective as a participant in the commercial drone space here.
I can see that. The children of the forest could have come up with accelerometer, flight controller technology. Okay. So we're here at Exponential. You had a keynote yesterday morning where you were up on stage, on the big stage in front of everybody, and you told everyone that was in attendance about your background, which is what I'd like to start with first. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, and how you got to PrecisionHawk.
Well, sure. It was great being able to give the kickoff keynote here at AUVSI. Besides that, this is really the pinnacle conference in the drone industry. You get a good sense of just everything going on across the board, from the developing of new technology to the direction the industry is headed in. And one of the things that I talked about in that keynote is I believe that we are at that pinnacle point where we're going to start seeing not just strong growth, but exponential growth in this industry. And I referenced the fact that I've seen this type of growth in an industry before. Before I joined PrecisionHawk as CEO, I was actually the co-founder and CEO of a large e-learning software company, Blackboard. If you go back to school nowadays, you register for your classes online, take tests and quizzes online, communicate with your fellow students and teachers online. I actually was one of the inventors of that technology back in the day, even though now this kind of may seem passé. Oh, no, thanks for dating me there. And I told the story that, so being in that industry also, that was an industry that, like the drone industry today, went through this level of exponential growth. And I'm starting to see a lot of these kind of similar indicators.
They call it like ed tech, right? Like education technology.
Yeah, education and technology. And I was telling the story on stage how I remember when I finally sold Blackboard, the company, I called up my mom on the phone and I said to my mom, "Mom, can you believe it? A company that I started with my roommate from college, we grew to have over 3,000 employees. A company that we began in a brownstone in downtown DC ended up having over 20 offices around the world. A company that started with just a small handful of schools using our technology to put some course material online, grew to over 30,000 institutions around the world with full online courses and degrees and programs. I started off with a small amount of friends in the education space, and I grew to have a huge social media following with over 100,000 users on Twitter, and was started as a small private company. We got to grow to be a public company. I got to run it as a public company for 7 years before selling it for just under $1.8 billion. And I remember my mom said to me, "Son, that's great, but remember, you're not a doctor." So Jewish mother. But the reason that I tell that story is, so at Blackboard, we saw these indicators that were happening in the industry that caused us not just to have strong growth, but hit that true hockey stick curve of adoption and growth. And I think people in the drone space, while we've had continued good growth over these last few years, have been saying, well, where's the exponential growth that we're all expecting? And my message was, it's starting now.
Back in 2017, I actually had Thomas Hahn. He was at PrecisionHawk at the time, executive vice president. He was on the show. He was a guest. Nowadays, of course, you're a different company from back in 2017. You guys raised $75 million round. The company has grown, lots of acquisitions, new products. You guys just announced Precision Analytics. You're involved in Beyond Visual Line of Sight. You've got heavy AI, machine learning. We've got pilot networks going on, 15,000. A lot of this data is taken from your presentation yesterday. So how do we then, what is the key then for us to experience this, us as an industry, the drone industry experience this hockey stick growth like ed tech did? I guess education technology might be slightly less regulated, but what do you think?
First of all, I believe it's the regulation that has held back the commercial drone industry from taking off, but that changed all in August of 2016. So when I was asked to come on board as CEO of PrecisionHawk, I looked at the market. I saw that the military drone market was a multi-billion-dollar market. The consumer drone market was a multi-billion-dollar market, and yet the commercial drone market was barely doing anything. But all that changed in August of 2016 when the FAA came out with Part 107, which gave companies a set of guidelines that if they followed, they too could utilize drone technology. So it doesn't take a Nostradamus to figure out that if all of the drone industries around it are billion-dollar companies, once the commercial drone industry opened up, it too would become a billion-dollar company. But it happened late. It happened in 2016. So what happened then in 2017, the companies just started dipping their toe in the water and saying, let me try a pilot project, or let me just try this, one piece of infrastructure, or try this one drone program. Or, Eric, the head of the UAS program at Florida Power and Light yesterday said they literally sent an email around to their 3,000 employees and said, hey, can anyone fly a drone? And that was how their project began. And that you're talking about in early 2017. So throughout 2017, you had all of these companies do these pilot programs. And then in 2018, they started to see the results of those programs and say, wow, this technology really works, which I think everyone around the table here knew and would have a sense that this is what, of course, would happen. But they needed to prove that it was worthwhile in their industries. And so that went on for 2017 into 2018. And now that they've proved that this technology is indeed incredibly valuable, at the end of 2018 and 2019, all these projects that were $20,000 or $30,000 pilot projects or small projects have turned into 7- and 8-digit deal size major enterprise implementations of drone technology. So when I talk about hitting that hockey curve, I don't believe that the hockey curve today is being pulled back or limited by regulation. I believe that it was delayed because of regulation, because before August of 2016, companies couldn't use drones really as part of their business. But starting then, it opened up the gates. And I think that everyone thought that, in 2017, things are going to take off. But no, it takes a little bit more time than that. So in 2017, they did the pilots. In 2018, they saw the results of those pilots. And now as we go into 2019 and beyond, they're starting to deploy in enterprise ways. And so we are starting to hit the hockey stick today.
You also mentioned yesterday on the keynote the focus that you guys are taking. So this was kind of wrapped up into the announcement of Precision Analytics software suite, software platform that you guys released. You said there was a huge focus. I mean, you emphasized this, it was underlined it multiple times, AI and machine learning. What are you guys up to with that? It does have to do with Next Era Florida Power, and I think you said it, Eric Schwartz, the head of innovation over there in UAS. What are you guys doing there to kind of push things forward? How is this going to help large companies like Florida Power and Light adopt drones and kind of push this technology forward?
So what I also talked in my keynote was I said, okay, the one thing that was holding back this exponential growth was that industry regulation wasn't ready yet, but that checkbox got taken care of in August of 2016 with Part 107. But then the second thing was saying, okay, well then is this a useful technology? So at PrecisionHawk, we have 3 main areas of focus. The first area of focus is we're building the largest drone pilot network. I have over 150 full-time trained Part 107 certified drone pilots who not only are Part 107 certified, but we've put them through additional training of being able to fly critical infrastructure like energy lines and telecom equipment and farmland. So these are drone pilots that are highly trained on these different types of infrastructure and at the same time highly trained on the different drones and sensors, not just your regular visual, but also thermal and LiDAR. We've even done some work with ground penetrating radar. So we're building that out so we can help companies collect data using drone technology. The second area of focus is BV loss. So we are very active in working with the FAA, and we were one of the contributors to the Pathfinder report, which identified how companies could fly beyond visual line of sight, because you really need to be able to keep your drones in the air longer and fly farther for there to be this cost savings and for you to collect more data. We're one of only 12 or so companies that have a BV loss waiver, so it gives us a huge advantage in the market, whereas in other companies can have to limit their flights to a mile, we can fly 3 to 4 miles, and we can collect additional data and information much easier and much more cost effective. And then the third piece is, now that we have the pilots and now that we can fly farther and collect the information, well, what are you doing with that information? We have a huge team of people focused on AI and machine learning. We are taking all of that great, rich, high megapixel data that the drones collect, and we're analyzing it so that businesses can get actionable business intelligence and make decisions based on that data. So for example, we originally flew Florida Power and Light, wanted to get some basic images of the different utility poles, a distribution line. And Eric was sharing a little bit about this on stage yesterday here at AUVSI. And so they hired us to collect that data. And then we went back to Florida Power and Light and we said, hey, you know what we can do? We can actually fly those poles with LiDAR and get exact measurements on all of the poles. And we can fly it with a visual and a thermal sensor and look for our electrical spikes and potential thermal issues. And we can also do an asset inventory and figure out everything on all of those poles. And if you take all that information together, we can put it into what's called an algorithm that will predict at what speed wind the pole will get knocked over at, and poles in Florida that get knocked over at 120 mile an hour winds they need to go replace. It's called their hardening program. And so suddenly we're taking what started as just basic, let me get some pictures of our utility poles, and we've turned it into an entire asset inventory, measurement, location, and analysis. And that's worth a huge amount to Florida Power and Light. And we are now doing this for other companies like Duke. We're flying for PG&E. So there's a lot of companies out there that want to start getting all this aerial data, but then turning it into useful and intelligent business information. And that's where the machine learning and AI comes in. So at the end of the day, what's really driving this hockey stick curve is that companies are finally saying, hey, wait a minute, sure, it's useful to get pictures of our assets, but if you're telling me that what I can do is I can actually start making business decisions based on what your computer analysis is going to tell me of those images, well, then this just moved from a nice to have to a must have. This could revolutionize my business.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors. Genius New York invests millions of dollars in drone and tech startups each year and is looking for its next $1 million team. The Business Accelerator, located in Syracuse, New York, provides your startup with resources, mentors, and industry-leading connections, plus a chance to compete for $1 million. So if you have a startup focused on unmanned systems, IoT, automation, or data analytics, don't miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Apply today at geniusny.com. What could your startup do with $1 million? Go to geniusny.com and apply today. Step into the growing season with this very special treat from MicaSense. For this month only, that's July 2019, buy a MicaSense Altum sensor and get a 6-month Agisoft Metashape license included for free, and enjoy high-quality thermal and multispectral imagery with advanced analytics. So the Altum sensor integrates a radiometric thermal camera with 5 high-resolution narrowbands, producing advanced thermal, multispectral, and high-resolution imagery in just one flight for advanced analytics in agriculture. So during July, get your MicaSense Altum sensor with a free 6-month license of Agisoft Metashape by using code AGI2019 at micasense.com. Okay, back to the show.
So keeping in the kind of theme with like the hockey stick slightly, I mean, I'm kind of liberally trying to find a segue here. Basically, what happened shortly, I guess roughly in the grand scheme of things, shortly after you joined, you guys raised the infamous, I will call it $75 million funding round. I think everybody was like, wow. I mean, people's jaws dropped. So first of all, can you tell us just, obviously we've seen, hindsight is 2020. We've seen a lot of steps that you guys have taken since then, the acquisitions and, just expansion of the business. Can you tell us just a little bit about maybe the background? Like, was it a conscious decision? Was it opportunistic maybe to get like such a relatively large funding round compared to other of your contemporaries in the space of drone software and services? And was it deliberate? Like, tell us just a little bit more about that, just behind the scenes, if you will.
One of the reasons why I joined PrecisionHawk was I believed that we were sitting on a multi-billion-dollar global opportunity. So, of course, you need to raise capital to go after that type of an opportunity. When I originally came on board PrecisionHawk, we were still making a fixed wing drone because at the time, back when PrecisionHawk had started, there weren't really any good drones out there that could carry a payload, a sensor heavy enough to do what we needed to do. But then over the years, other drone companies had come up and been able to make cheaper drones that could carry the sensor. So there's no reason for us to be in the hardware business anymore. But what myself and the rest of the team saw was this big opportunity in expanding the drone pilot network. So we acquired droners.io and we started building up our own internal resources for drone pilots because we knew that data capture was going to be critical. And then we saw that if we have all that data, we want to make sure that we can do great analysis and turn it into useful business intelligence and results. And so we started building up our machine learning and AI side. So all that was part of the plan for the initial capital raise. And so far, it's really worked out well for us.
Nice. And congratulations on that. I want to talk about two products. One that used to exist, which you touched on, and then a new one, relatively new, that exists. The one that used to exist, the Lancaster, the fixed-wing drone, I think that was discontinued before you started at PrecisionHawk, or I don't know the exact timeline.
No. One of the first things I did was just do an analysis of the market, and I decided to discontinue that drone within about the first month of me being on the as part of the team.
So that was a pretty quick decision then, I guess.
It wasn't a difficult decision. Again, there were lots of other competing drones out there that were just as good and maybe even a little cheaper. We didn't have a strategic advantage to be there in that space. So it made sense for us at the end of the day to utilize other people's drones, but put together a strategy where we could excel.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, from a business case, it makes complete sense, really. The other product, the new kind of product, I don't know if you even call this really a product. It's kind of a partnership. DJI, the airspace information now for all DJI drones. Well, I don't know all the specifics on it, but it's all going through PrecisionHawk. Used to be AirMap, so now all of that data is provided by PrecisionHawk. Can you just tell us about this? How does this actually function? What was the kind of the genesis of this? And how does it kind of play into the whole strategy of PrecisionHawk moving forward?
Well, obviously, because we have such a large drone pilot network, we are always aware of the different flight restrictions and areas and making sure that we have the right waivers and permission. So we've been collecting this data for a while. In addition, we use that data as part of our BVLOS drone program as well. So it's a very similar data set. We have a great relationship with DJI, and they were looking for that type of data. And our data set was a little bit more expansive than the AirMap data set. And so through conversations, DJI asked us, hey, could we use this for our US-based drones? And of course, being a great partner of DJI, we thought that made a lot of sense. So it was really a data set that we were using internally for ourselves and for our BVLOS drone, but went ahead and shared it with DJI so they could be successful with that data set as well.
So it's just for the US or North America?
Okay. Yeah, yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Got some listener questions. Really interesting.
Go ahead. Are any of them about Game of Thrones?
No, I already spoiled that for everybody.
What about the Avengers movie? I can talk about that too. I just saw that this past weekend.
Well, you'd be spoiling that for me, so I don't know. Maybe we'll go ahead and wait on that. If we have time at the end. You guys have done a lot of work in Beyond Visual Line of Sight, pushing that forward. Pathfinder program. This has been going on for years, I guess I'll say. Again, these are listener questions. How long do you see Beyond Visual Line of Sight being a case-by-case approval? So kind of being able to have to submit a COA, waiver, that whole kind of process. And the second part is, do you believe there will be an airframe/use case level of approval? So by type of drone as well, or I am doing this type of operation, can I do Beyond Visual Line of Sight?
Those are both good million-dollar questions. I wish I was kind of a Nostradamus and could guess which direction that the federal government was going to go. I do think it is likely to continue for a while and be both, that the FAA is going to need to approve individual airframes and different use cases because there are, quite frankly, so many of them. But also, look, the FAA wants to be particularly careful about flying drones beyond visual line of sight so it doesn't interfere with what their primary purpose is, which is to safeguard the airways. And I think it's appropriate for them to both look at the technology and the use cases. So while I think that they are increasing the capability and their own ability to approve those type of waivers, I don't see those individual waivers going away anytime soon.
Yeah, same here. I mean, it's going to take a bit. We've got another one here. We've got a few. So good listeners. Thank you to all the people who are listening and supporting the podcast. These are great questions. The next one is, do you see there being a pay-to-play model in controlled airspace approvals? So I guess this is kind of tacked on to the last one somewhat loosely. But when I kind of mentioned this to you right before we started recording, you were like, this has been solved. So tell us how.
So I think originally when people started thinking about the type of adoption that drones could be in the future, like one day there could be thousands or even millions of drones in the air naturally, they said, okay, well, there has to be a roadway for drones, but yet it's also, they're kind of like airplanes, and how do airplanes work? Well, especially in other countries where the air traffic control system is private, when a plane files its flight plan, they pay $50 or some amount to that agency, and there's 1 million flights a day, and so it's an incredibly profitable opportunity. So a lot of the people that invested in the space said, wow, if we could just be that drone air traffic control system, and there's truly going to be millions of drones, this is $1 billion opportunity. And I think that was a good thesis at the time. But I think what's really happened is, instead of moving in the direction of, oh, there's going to be this centralized drone center that tells you the path in which your drone has to fly, what it really has become down to more something that you can do on your iPhone, like running Google Maps or Waze. You don't pay someone to give your car a route between two destinations. You can just do it for free on your iPhone. And I think that that's the direction it's going with the drones. I think there'll be other mechanisms to make sure that drones don't accidentally run into each other, but I think you'll just be able to manage it from your phone. You'll either get a route or your drone will provide a route, but it'll be through a decentralized open model for free. And quite frankly, I think that's already been proven by the fact that when you can do now these waivers automatically, online, or you can download a number of different software that has all the different airspace regulations to do your own planning, and they're all free already. And we haven't even, moved into the larger players in the space yet.
Yeah, totally agree. The last question here is on the adoption rates of drones. So I'll try to kind of paraphrase this. I'll preface this actually. AUVSI released a report, God, it's been so long, 2012 maybe, about how big the drone industry will be. And it was like kind of seemed astronomical. It was huge. It was billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars by like 2020. Here we are 1 year away of 2020. And I think that kind of predicated a lot of funding for, companies like Airware, which was like probably the first small commercial drone company that like got a bunch of funding. So there were always these super high expectations. Now, the adoption rate, which we kind of touched on a little bit earlier when you were talking about this hockey stick growth, but the adoption rate, as far as we know, it's sitting here in 2019, has not really kept up with the predictions. So how has the adoption rate adapted to the reality versus the original expectations, and maybe like why? Maybe you can expand on that.
I have two ways that I want to answer that question. So first of all, you always have to realize that when you're in the moment, it always seems like, wow, 2020 is only a year away, and they said it was going to be this multi-billion-dollar industry, and it hasn't yet shown up. Look, 20 years from now, whether the drone industry ended up taking off in 2019 or 2025, it won't really have mattered in the scheme of history. That report will still have been right, just, off by a year or two. It's only when you're literally waiting for the industry to turn do you think it's a bigger deal. I mean, I think that those numbers are correct. I think drone technology is going to affect that much business, but in a slightly different way. And let me expand upon that. When people talk about the size of the smartphone market, they used to talk about it just in terms of, okay, well, how many smartphones are you going to sell? And that was it. Well, yet today, smartphones touch every single industry, from banking to food to delivery to communications, right? So what's the market of the smartphone industry? It's almost like, the market of half of the companies out there because everybody's using mobile technology. I think drone technology you're going to see is going to have mass adoption. So it's not about how many drones are sold, but I do think that, all major industry or construction or infrastructure companies or Fortune 500 are going to start using drone technology in major ways over the next few years. So do I believe that overarching umbrella of looking at how drones are going to affect business is going to be in the tens of billions of dollars, the same way that cell phones touch all of these different industries in the hundreds of billions of dollars? I absolutely do. Do I think it's going to happen in the next few years? I also agree with that. So I think that those reports are all directionally correct. Did they, get the exact right month? Maybe not. Is the scoping a little bit narrower than I put it? I absolutely think so. Look, if you had asked me 2 years ago, when I first joined PrecisionHawk, the common thinking was, oh, drones are so easy. Everybody's going to, buy their own drone, and we're just going to focus on the software that enables the drone to do an analysis of what people want to fly and collect data for. Now, 2 years later, what we're finding is lots of people want to start collecting data with drones, but actually, while flying a drone is easy, flying it in the way to properly collect the data, to stitch it together, to analyze it, to build the 3D models, a lot more complex. And so what we've done is we've built this huge drone pilot network. I have 150 full-time drone pilots on staff and 15,000. If the industry had gone the other way, where everyone was just buying their own drone, I wouldn't need that giant network. But I do. So again, so what that means is that every company doesn't have their own drone division. They're all using PrecisionHawk or other companies like PrecisionHawk, but they are still using drones just in a slightly different way. So I'm not sure that we exactly have figured out all the ways that drones are going to change business and the way that people are going to collect data with drones and how that data is going to be analyzed. But the two things I can tell you that we have figured out, and why, as I started this conversation, do I believe that we're at the beginning of that exponential curve? Companies are starting to utilize drone technology en masse to collect data, but they're just doing it by hiring PrecisionHawk instead of doing it themselves. And they're doing it because they want to get useful information out of that data, not just to help them run the business today, but to start gathering this data digitally and electronically so they can analyze it over time to do predictive analytics and better understand their business in the future, using AI and machine learning to truly improve the way they're doing business. And they're able to do that because of the data collection power of the drones. So I think that drones and AI is what's going to drive this exponential growth. And I think that exponential growth is happening now.
Well, I would also even liken that kind of prediction, AUVSI, I know that we're talking about it. It's like Game of Thrones started originally around the same time. It's going to end around the same time as the AUVSI report. I would have predicted that, yes, the Night King will die at some point. Is Arya going to be the one that kills him? Is it going to happen in 2019 or 2020 for the drone industry? I don't know. So I agree with you on that. Good stuff. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for listening. You just heard Michael Chasen, CEO of PrecisionHawk. And if you want to learn more about PrecisionHawk, go to PrecisionHawk.com in the web browser. And if you're a drone pilot and want to sign up for their network to fly missions for them, you can go to droners.io. And finally, Michael Chasen was kind enough to leave his email address. If you have a question for him, a comment, or just want to tell him how much you loved his podcast on Commercial Drones FM, send him an email at Mike is as in the phonetic alphabet, m.chasen@precisionhawk.com. And I promise I won't put that on the website so that you get spam botted or whatever the hell with the crawlers and the creepers on the web. So thank you so much for being a guest, Michael. Really appreciate it.
It was exciting to be here, and I think I was honestly surprised that not only did we have a good conversation about commercial drone technology, but spoiler alerts for Game of Thrones. So terrific.
My bad, everybody.
A dual-purpose podcast here.
Exactly, yeah. So sorry if you hadn't seen that episode yet, but I'll make sure this one doesn't air immediately. All right, we're going to cut off the mics. Cheers.